The camera, Marcelo.
Recadinho de sempre, dentro da bolsa tem esse folhetinho para que vocês possam se associar ao capítulo nacional.
So inside of your subscription bag, there's this leaflet with discounts and access to scientific articles. And I once again would like to say that we are broadcasting live on Espírito Free Mind, okay? We have Portuguese and English translation. So I would like you to share the link on YouTube, like our channel, make comments, and special thanks to the people from Unify. They are broadcasting to us. So thank all of you who are watching us online. Hello, my friends from the international chapters. I would also like to tell you that since the event's being recorded, it's going to remain on our YouTube channel. And if you're interested, we are launching something called Pocket Free Mind. So we're going to have a therapeutic justice panel. You can organize a panel in your place. You can invite panelists, and you can put together an event. We'll give you all the support that you need. You can use ESUP and Free Mind. You can invite people. You organize the panel, and then you discuss topics in your city. We are going to have 12 panels recorded, so you will be able to show 12 panels for people who were not able to be here. So feel free to do a Pocket Free Mind in your city. Now we are going to start our afternoon panel, and it is Impacts of Alcohol Abuse and Other Drugs in the Justice System, Indicated Prevention and Therapeutic Justice. Our dear friend, Dr. Mário Sérgio Sobrinho, a round of applause to him. Thank you. Dr. Mário is a prosecutor of the Public Ministry of the State of São Paulo. He's a huge partner, and his main education is focused on helping the others. I would also like to invite Dr. Eduardo Alencar Thomaziello. Please, Dr. Eduardo, a round of applause. Dr. Eduardo is from Campinas. He has a degree in medicine from Unicamp, and he specializes in family and community medicine, etc. and etc. Please take a seat. The CV of all of our panelists is on our Free Mind homepage. And now I would like to invite Dr. Francisco Paulo de Almeida. He is a psychiatrist and medical coordinator of the psychiatry at the AME, a project in São Paulo. Dr. Mário, it is 2:45 and I am giving you the microphone. Thank you, Paulo. Thank you, everyone. I would like to thank all of you, and I would also want to pay compliments to the 7th Free Mind Conference. And at every edition, we have more and more participants, and the panels are getting better and better, and it is really helping us here in Brazil to address such a complex topic as substance abuse. You might be students or professionals or politicians, and we see that in Brazil it is really important to offer education and training because we are really behind other countries. Today we are going to talk about the impacts of alcohol abuse and other drugs on the justice system and indicated prevention and therapeutic justice. I would also like to thank Dr. Eduardo Alencar Thomaziello. He's a doctor here in the city of Campinas. He's extremely concerned with the population of Campinas. He is aware of the difficulties the population faces, especially related with alcohol and other drugs. And we also have Dr. Francisco Paulo de Almeida. He is a psychiatrist and medical coordinator of the psychiatry at AMI. I would like all of you to participate by asking questions or making comments. Dr. Eduardo and Francisco will be able to share with you their experience on alcohol and drugs. I will ask Jonas for his help. We are going to start with a 3-minute video, and I'm going to talk to you about therapeutic justice. It is a video that is going to explain to you better than my words could. Restructuring of the person, therapeutic justice program. More than an alternative initiative, the program is an opportunity to think about substance abuse and its effects on individuals and their families. The benefits are proper attention to the problems of abuse of alcohol and drugs. And how does therapeutic justice work? The first step is consensus between prosecutors, judges, and lawyers analyzing crimes of smaller criminal potential as a consequence of use of alcohol and drugs. In order to get to know the system and include the individual in the program as best as possible, we have the help of groups like AA, Naranol, Associação Anti-Alcoólica de São Paulo, and Amores de Gente. When we present the proposal, the presence of family members is extremely important, and because everyone is able to learn about the impact of abuse of alcohol and drugs. Commitment to the program isn't mandatory. After getting all the information and guidance, the convicted might opt to join the program or not. Accepting the proposal is accepting a commitment, and the individuals are going to be inspected by the Justice Department and followed up by healthcare professionals. The opinion of voluntaries and healthcare professionals is of utmost utmost importance. Prosecutors will always take the legal measures requested by the case. After the end of the process, the prosecutor is going to see if the program has been finished. And the therapeutic justice has proved to be a very good alternative when it comes to crimes of minor impact related to alcohol and drug abuse. And the objective is to rescue dignity and promote a new lifestyle. Well, I work at the Public Ministry of the State of São Paulo. I've been there for more than 30 years. And for more than 20 years, I've had the opportunity of working with issues related with alcohol and other drugs. I help lawyers, prosecutors, judges when they are focusing on justice and people who are within the judicial system and have problems with drugs or alcohol. So we are trying to give you an overall panorama about how alcohol and other drugs impact the justice system. And therapeutic justice can be seen as an alternative form of prevention. So I'm opening up my presentation. Dr. Eduardo and Dr. Francisco are going to talk to you as well. And it's going to be a very good opportunity to hear what they have to say, because they have been in the field for a long time and have tons of knowledge in this topic. What I would like to share with you is information about the impact alcohol and other drugs causes to society. And it also affects the justice system. This is a note from the Pan-American healthcare community. It shows the diseases and disorders that can be caused by alcohol. And it highlights results of violence and even car crashes. We know that there are many car crashes that are the result of people who drank and drove. There are also issues related with domestic violence, suicide. The impacts are rather significant for the whole of society, and it ends up getting to the public prosecution office. Alcohol and drugs impact much, much more young people and teenagers. So when we talk about the UN Office Against Drug and Crime, there's a very important reference. I recommend you to take a look. They say that at least 20% of the people who are in the prison system are people who have problems with drug use. They highlight that the increase of drug use among people who are within the prison system is more significant, is stronger than the rest of the population in the world. In this very website, you're going to find also a manual. It is a very good piece of material. There are different approaches of treatment and care for people who are drug abusers, and are within the prison system. Brazil is still crawling in this field, but we have NIDA on the US and other institutions. They recognize justice as well as family, as well as employers. They are important agents to help individuals comply and seek treatment. So this is an overall of what we have here in Brazil. So this information is from 12 years ago. 75% of the teenagers who were convicted to do something, 75% of them said they used some type of drug, and 90% of them talked about marijuana, 43% cocaine, and 23% crack. And there are two references that you can use for research. In Brazil, we still don't have any large statistic survey about the effect of alcohol and drugs in the incarcerated population. But within those people, 89% mentioned drug or alcohol abuse. Here, before passing the floor to Dr. Eduardo, I would like to say that when we talk about prevention, there are three types of prevention. Professor Zila Sanchez, she is an expert in prevention. She studied the literature and she showed us this division: indicated, selective, and universal prevention. So I would say that indicated prevention is the one that is focused on groups of people who have risk behaviors that had been previously detected, people who are subject to the impacts of the drugs. The measures could include suggest, quitting use, or something else. So therapeutic justice is an umbrella expression that includes all the possible meanings of justice. Well, if we offer them references, we offer them information about their health status, and we encourage them to seek treatment on themselves, maybe an outpatient treatment or a self-help group of support and things like that. So prevention as a whole is done in and within families, in society, at schools, and in an individual level. I think that therapeutic justice is included in initiative indicated by the Public Prosecution Office. This can be done in different scenarios, and the justice sphere is one of the scenarios in which we can try to connect people with care. So therapeutic justice would be a justice, a judicial program. You know, I can conduct a program in a community somewhere, but the program has to be carried out by judges, lawyers, prosecutors, and they have to be encouraged to try and understand what led people to commit certain crimes, and they have to have knowledge in order to refer these possible infractors alternatives of treatments. Remember that therapeutic justice programs are not going to be good for all types of people. If there's a type of person murdered someone, or if performed some kind of violent theft, they are not going to be referred to therapeutic justice. But when there are light crimes and misdemeanors or minor crimes, they might be included in therapeutic justice projects. This name is kind of a label, as sometimes you're going to find it as citizenship, justice, restorative justice, systemic justice, or sometimes it doesn't have an expression. But whenever we see the connection of someone who is within the judicial service and needs care, the person isn't arrested or anything. When the prosecutor, public official, judge, they can articulate with the local care system, and if they seek treatment, it's a way of helping them out. Here in the public ministry of Campinas, the professionals started working in this sense. So offenders who performed minor crimes started to be referred to support groups like the AA, and the outcomes were really interesting. And whenever there's a situation of drug abuse, if minor offenders engage in some sort of treatment, it's much better for society than staying in jail. But in the case of abuser or a problematic or heavier user, this situation is not going to be possible.
Overall. So, bottom line. Therapeutic justice must involve a situation where someone who is in the justice system abusing alcohol and drugs, someone who has committed some offense, some misdemeanor or minor crime that will put that person in the justice system. And then in the justice system or before the justice system, this person may, through the public prosecution, we have to know that that person has a problem with drugs or alcohol. This person can be entered into a program or even a system that can help him or her receive health care, basic primary health care or specialized health care. Support groups like Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Naranon, Dalanan, Amor Exigente, there are many. And this can only happen if there's articulation between lawyers, judges, prosecutors, the healthcare system, law enforcement, because people have to understand that addiction is a health problem. But still, it does not impair you, and it's not impairing it. You can lead a normal life, and you can also commit crimes in this type of condition. Unfortunately, if they commit a crime, if they commit a misdemeanor, they should be punished, but at the same time, they should receive care and attention. So overall, this is what's recommended by the NADA, is that NADA is the National Agency for Drug Abuse in the United States, and the National Institute for Drug Abuse in the US. And employers and all stakeholders should encourage those people to look for treatment and, most of all, to comply with the treatment. So these are some sources that I used. My thanks, my acknowledgements, and I thank you all for being here today. And over to you, Dr. Eduardo. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Mario, Sérgio. I was invited to talk about the interface between the justice system and the healthcare system, more specifically the primary care. I am a family and community doctor. I've been working with primary care for over 25 years. I'm currently a manager of the São Diego Health Center here in the city, and I wanted to share with you some of my reflections on this interface and how these services can be organized, what we do to fulfill this demand when it comes from the justice system. So I'm just going to show you some data about the epidemiology of drug and alcohol abuse. 2 billion people worldwide consume alcohol, and this practice is associated with many cultures. It's a cultural thing around the globe, but it is also it's associated with sports events, cultural events, even religious ceremonies. However, this high prevalence has substantial and serious consequences to public health care worldwide. So I'm going to show you some data about that. Between parentheses, there's a number there. It's going to appear in the references later. All the references are presented at the end of my presentation, and my presentation is already available to be shared. Just talk to the organizers. It's available. So 5.3% of all deaths on the planet in 2016 were somehow associated with the harmful consumption of alcohol, even more than HIV/AIDS, diabetes, or dyslipidemia. Just for us to have a picture of how impactful this is on healthcare services. In Brazil, alcohol is the 4th major risk factor for premature deaths that occur between 30 and 69 years. This is one of the risk factors for premature death and also impairment. It's responsible for 7% of the disease burdens. So our healthcare, our alcohol-related mortality accounts for 6.7% of the burden on the healthcare system. And finally, healthcare professionals today must be familiar with this type of condition. A meta-analysis that was published a couple of years ago at Lancet considered not only CV diseases, but it suggests that the safe level of alcohol consumption is 0 doses a day. I'm sure there are many HCPs here, and we have to study that because this is the highest level of evidence we have. It's a meta-analysis that considered studies from 1990 to 2016 in 190 countries. Some studies say that, oh, okay, 2 glasses of wine a day are good, that's fine, but then there's countless studies showing the impact on the legal system, the impact on cancer and chronic diseases, including diabetes and high blood pressure, and the conclusion is the dose that prevents diseases is 0. The actual dose that prevents diseases is 0. This is already accepted in some scientific circles. Even some well-known journals already bring this recommendation. As an HCP, you cannot tell your patient that a glass of beer a day or 2 glasses of wine a day can help prevent diseases. This is not what we're supposed to do. Of course, there are those who will say the opposite, but we as healthcare professionals cannot ever recommend alcohol. 50% of all Brazilians over 50 drink at least once a year. 4% will present some sort of alcohol-related disorder, light, even, albeit mild. This is the classification that we use in the Brazilian healthcare system. I think it was last updated in 2013, but it's being reviewed. But still, I'm using the latest updates here. So we're using the classification, the mild alcohol-related disorder. 4% of all Brazilians have that. 14% will have moderate to severe alcohol-related disorders. So in the same study, they concluded that the relative growth of women among women was more significant, from 27% to 38% in 4 years, which is, 6 years. And there's also some data showing that the sooner adolescents become familiar with alcohol, the greater the likelihood of having alcohol-related problems in the future. The prognosis is clear, and the sooner they start, the greater the chances of having some level of dependency in the future. Data shows that especially if they start before the age of 14, the higher the likelihood of developing some sort of dependency in adulthood. It is avoidable, preventable for a neuropsychiatric disorder, so it's a preventable risk factor. If it's a preventable risk factors are not related to your biology or your genetics, but it's related to your lifestyle, your habits, as well as other diseases like cirrhosis, CV diseases, and many types of cancer. Most of the harm caused by alcohol occurs in those who drink moderately to severely, but also among those who have this mild consumption. Of course, binge drinkers stand out as having more problems. Binge drinking is particularly common among teenagers, but also among adults. They go to parties and they chug it. They drink it, they binge drink it. So the criteria for that is 5 doses in an hour for men and 4 for women. About 0.8 milligrams per deciliter, and that's what causes the acute problems associated with violence, car accident, sexual exposure. And of course here there's this is often the case, often the cause of their first contact with the justice system. Maybe you're not a chemical dependent, you're not an abuser, but sometimes because of peer pressure, you binge drink in a party and then you get involved in violence or in some sort of problem that will eventually put you in contact with the justice system. There are some initiatives in place to tackle that, especially focusing now on healthcare services, healthcare models. There's an initiative by the WHO from 2018. It's called SAFER, with 5 major strategies to reduce the harmful consumption of alcohol by 10% until 2025. So first is reinforce the restriction in the availability of alcohol. This means passing laws, and some countries are already doing a good job at that, to protect children and teenagers in terms of reducing the availability of alcohol, not having alcohol available in major sports events or major crowds where alcohol use can lead to violence. The second major strategy is strengthening and inspecting measures to avoid drinking under the influence of alcohol. We have very strict laws for that in Brazil. Banning or limiting advertising and promotion of alcohol use in the media, especially in shows directed at children and teenagers. Increase taxes on alcohol on alcohol manufacturing and sales. It's similar to what was done with tobacco with good results. And fifth, the major strategy that has to do with public health. It has to do with healthcare services in general. This is where I'm in, to enable easy tracking and early intervention and treatment of alcohol-related problems. And this is what we're going to focus on now. Diagnosis. During the diagnosis, we must always ask the patient about their consumption patterns, because when we learn to do this type of questioning, we always ask them how much do they drink, but not whether they drink or not, because if they don't drink, they close the conversation right away. So we must ask them, what is your drinking pattern, your drinking standards, considering the high prevalence of that in the population. We know that alcohol consumption is prevalent in the population, so considering the population that searches us in healthcare services, this prevalence is even higher, and then we have to ask them that. We do that in the assessment phase. We have some tools like CAGE, audit, and there are also biochemical markers when we ask for tests, labs. If you suspect any alcohol abuse, the labs can give us some information. We must always believe, well, intervention is always required when there's chronic abuse, chronic use, or any sign of chemical dependency. And when you suspect, and we have to ask them, when you suspect that headache, that illness is related to alcohol, you have to ask them, because you have to accurately determine when drinking became a disorder for that patient. It's like, for example, with high blood pressure, 12/8 is fine, 13/9 is okay, over 14/9 is too much. And it's pretty much with alcohol and other drugs, this threshold is not so accurate. We have to consider the continuity of the habit, and to assess that, we must always ask the right questions to our patients. So the best conduct, the best strategy is to, once you identify the problem, use the early intervention before the patient's condition evolves into severe and moderate, because we want this cumulative impact. Then more individuals that receive low-cost interventions in the early stages of the disorder, the better, because the prognosis is more favorable. So the more we use our health care resources to do prevention and to tackle this problem at an early stage, the better. The better the prognosis for the patient, and the better the results we'll achieve. The fewer interventions we'll need in the future, the fewer people in the future will have chronic problems. Regardless of the diagnosis, every patient should receive information about driving under the influence, operating machinery under the influence of alcohol and other drugs, and with women in particular, they should receive some information about the fetal alcoholic syndrome or disorder. But does that really happen? My question is, I just told you what we should do, but is this the standard of care in our health centers? Before we put the blame on healthcare professionals, which is the easy way out, oh, they don't do that because healthcare professionals are not committed enough, because doctors are lazy, because nurses are always in a bad mood. We like to put the blame on healthcare professionals. This became very clear during the pandemic. HCPs were working like never before, and they were always to blame. They were always guilty of all problems. That's common in society, right? So let's pay attention to the model we have today and how healthcare professionals can manage this and what we can do to help our healthcare professionals. A common division in healthcare is dividing diseases by chronic, non-transmissible, and transmissible diseases. This classification does not really work when you try to organize healthcare systems. And now the division we use is communicable diseases, chronic diseases, or communicable diseases that become chronic diseases like tuberculosis, AIDS, or HIV, Hanseníasis, and this has a great influence on how we organize care. So why do we have this new division? Because this helps us improve the care we provide. With acute diseases, health teams act in reactive ways, fragmented ways. You don't need that medical appointment with 15 minutes. You need just to take action quickly. You treat them. You can make the diagnosis, and it has a limited length in time. We try to apply that for chronic diseases as well, but it doesn't really work, because for us to organize the care of chronic conditions, we need a proactive team that works continuously and in an integrated fashion. And that's why I highlighted the word integrated and in a networks of healthcare. Conditions are more than diseases, or a pregnancy, for example, is not really a disease, but it is a condition, right? These are chronic conditions. Our healthcare system is designed to respond to acute conditions and some chronic conditions, but then it's focused on the disease again. We learned this in college, right? You have a disease, you prescribe a medication, and that's it. That's how we deal with people's health. Let's say, and we can even prescribe changes in lifestyle, like, oh, lose weight, eat well, don't drink alcohol, don't smoke, and prescribe something, and that's it. So in practice, this becomes the tyranny of acute conditions. And this is a universal crisis. It's not only a problem in Brazil, it's a global problem. And it's not only a problem with our public health system, it's also present in the private health system. So this crisis is the reflex of the mismatch between a healthcare system that was designed for the last century and the new conditions and the new behaviors of our century. There is this mismatch, and in order to strike a balance and drive positive change, we have to make some changes and start seeing things in a different way. We need to think of new resources, new funding systems, new leadership styles, new arrangements, because again, our healthcare system is organized in the same way it was in the last century, in the past century. It's rigid and it's not flexible enough to respond to the needs of modern society. We have to make changes, especially or including in the management, in our management model. So, how do we face the tyranny of acute diseases? The tyranny of acute diseases. So doctors sometimes, they just tell a patient what to do, prescribe some medication, and that's it. And users are often not involved in the decision making. They do not participate in the decision-making process. And that's essential for the management of chronic diseases, because the management of chronic diseases involves and demands self-care. That's why I highlighted it. So we can talk about the experience of other countries that have been more successful than Brazil in that. And that's why, again, I emphasize the importance of care networks. And these networks, they don't have a hierarchy. They're horizontal rather than vertical, but they have common objectives and the same mission. They work in a cooperative manner that ends in the care lines, which is also highlighted here at the end. The Ministry of Health recently published some care guidelines. The care guidelines include several services, like for child care, for mother care, primary care. And there is a very interesting document with guidelines from the Ministry of Health. It encompasses everything from child care to specialized care. And we're finally setting the references for how to organize this system. Primary care organizes the network and orders the care. To the right, or to your left, many types of care. Cross-sector initiatives, hospitals. This is the network I was talking about. It involves specialized services, general services, psychosocial support, what we call CAPIs, specialized outpatient clinics, and then here, of course, this is the network. It was not made by Spider-Man, although it may look like it was. This is what we call the healthcare network. It's organized in a non-hierarchical fashion with some particularities, of course, but what stands out here is the fact that the actions are continuous, cooperative, and interdependent. Looks a lot, and it looks like very abstract, I know, but in some places this is already quite successful. So let me tell you how Eugênio Vilaça designed this model for Brazil. Professor Vilaça, who designed this chronic care model for Brazil. We usually say this model was designed in the 90s in the American city of Seattle by Dr. Edward Wagner, and it was adapted to Brazil by Dr. Vilaça. And its formulation, this was designed to try and provide better care to the locals. We know that there are no simple solutions to complex problems. Complex problems require complex solutions, and this takes time. Edward Wagner said that the chronic care model is not a silver bullet, but a multidimensional solution for a complex problem. And over the years, through literature, they did research, and they showed that the system works. There are some key elements to this model that today Vilaça has brought to Brazil. Clinical training programs with electronic medical records, decision-making support, clinical guidelines for decision-making, a service provision system with a reference service that is your partner and communicates with the primary care, and also that magical word that is supported self-care. Supported self-care appears in every healthcare model, and not only for the healthcare system, but it's also for the community self-management. We'll see that too. A service system alone, without the engagement of the community, will never achieve the results we want. And then there are these production interactions between a proactive health team, a team that's been prepared, that's engaged, active, well-informed, with people who have been empowered by healthcare professionals, will achieve the clinical and functional results that we need. So Professor Vilaça came up with 3 models. He used the chronic care model. He also used the risk pyramid model from Permanent Kaiser, It is it's like a risk classification model. And this permanent Kaiser risk classification model, people already have this chronic condition. There's a first level where we have about 80% of the people with simple conditions. You use this supported self-care. So this is for simple conditions or for chronic conditions, where the main tool is this supported self-care. The second level involves a little more complex situations. This involves about 20 to 30% of the people, which uses clinical management conditions. And then in the last case, 105% of all conditions, highly complex situations with major repercussions for the healthcare system. Then you do the case management, which is another clinical management category. So Professor Vilaça combined all this with a health determination model by Dahlgren and Whitehead, which is widely used in the UK. You have the social drivers, proximal drivers, distal, macro, proximal, and they brought this to the Brazilian model. He came up with a model that applies to the Brazilian healthcare system. This is Vilaça's major contribution to the care system in Brazil's SUS healthcare system. To the left here, you have the 5 levels of care in the population as a whole, where you have health promotion initiatives. Then on the second level, to the left, we have self-care, supported self-care. To the right, and as the longitudinal line goes up, so there are subpopulations with risk factors associated with lifestyle and behaviors on level 2, and then here we use a lot of the supported self-care, and then you need a team that is trained in this tool. So this is Vilaça's major contribution to this research. This is what we try to adopt here in Campinas. It's already adopted in other Brazilian cities like Santo Antônio do Monte, Curitiba. They also received federal support to do that, and then they're here. I put the definition of self-care, the ability to deal with symptoms, and he's reading it. So and by supported, we mean healthcare professionals supporting the individual and empowering the individual to care for his or her own health through individual and collective actions, supported by print or online material, so that people learn more about their own chronic conditions and acquire the necessary skills to manage them. It's a number or a set of interventions. There's not a single intervention that can do the trick here. For example, including the abuse of psychoactive substances or alcohol. This type of intervention requires a number of initiatives so that people can receive proper care. You have to consider the resources that are available in the community, so it's important to have many options, because a single option would not be enough. And always, when we talk about supported self-care, things have to be clear and black and white. It can't be just a platonic and ideal and abstract. You need a care plan. You need a strategy. You need a plan. You need a clear plan with steps and a strategy. You have to teach people how to monitor their symptoms, how to adjust their medication. For example, if you have asthma, you must write it down, when to use bronchodilators, when to look for healthcare support, adjust the medication, and determine when some extra care is necessary. So the care plan. Here in Campinas, we have already started that, and we are actually successful in the Campo Belo Center. We have some successful cases here in the San Diego Center, and this care plan adapts to the level of literacy or the level of education of our patients. It has to be simple and straight to the point. It can't be very intricate, and that's why we like this name care plan, because sometimes the healthcare that the health team creates a very complex plan. Can't be like that. It has to be done together with the patient. The patient will choose what he or she wants according to the management that he or she can do and the information that he or she can manage. This is indicated even for people with low levels of education. The plan must be individualized during appointments and reviewed at every upcoming appointment, every follow-up appointment. So that I have some more slides, but have I run out of time? Have I run out of time? No, there's also the motivational interview. It's interesting. That's why I put it here. We have already had some training programs for healthcare professionals in Campinas, but not enough. So the motivational interview, it was created by Millie Ronick, and it's also very interesting for you guys who work with chemical dependency and drug addicts. We discovered that this technique, this tool, is very useful for the management of chronic conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes. One of the precursors of this motivational interview was Marco Palliot, who wrote Doctor, Patient, and Disease. It's a book where he creates some groups. It's also a mandatory book for family primary care doctors. Before you need to read Barrett, because he talks about our reflex of fixing things. We learn, as healthcare professionals, we learn that we must always come up with a diagnosis and cure our patients. But with chronic diseases, we have to listen more than talk. We have to enable our patients to tell their story without feeling guilty or ashamed. We HCPs are good at making patients embarrassed and guilty. Sometimes we don't even have to say anything. Just frown upon them, just roll your eye. If a patient tells us they have relapsed, we just don't say anything, but if we roll our eyes, that's enough. So Parent was very fortunate when he monitored some family doctors in the UK in the 50s and in the 60s, and he identified that the most compliant patients were not because of the patient's technical expertise, but because of the relationship they established with the doctor. And then doctors were seen as medications, like with side effects. There's also dosing for that. There were dosing procedures, administration for that. So there are some necessary changes to ensure this healthcare with self-care, supported healthcare, supported self-care that is effective and efficient. We need to introduce new ways of care like distance support, telemedicine, online meetings, seek the relative increment between scheduled and non-scheduled appointments. Over 50% of our time is occupied by spontaneous demands. It's not easy to convince the population and the team that scheduling, like having scheduled appointments, is not enough. So we need some free time for chronic diseases. The planned use of tools to support evidence-based healthcare guidelines and the like. Tracking tools like age and audit, case management for bearers of more complex diseases, and regular monitoring of chronic diseases. It's what we call surveillance. We're good at doing the surveillance of meningitis, dengue fever, COVID, acute conditions, but we do a very bad job when it comes to the surveillance of chronic diseases like high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, and patients with mental health disorders, let alone chemical dependency, right? Which is the topic of this panel. So sometimes drug abusers contact us, or binge drinkers. They come to us, we identify our problems, but we fail to do the surveillance. We do no follow-up, and that would be essential for the delivery of proper care for those patients. These are the references, and if we have any time left later, I am available for Q&A. Thank you.
I would like to thank Dr. Eduardo Thomaziello. He showed us how primary health care can be central support for issues of alcohol and drug abuse. It can even contribute and offer solutions and resources that the justice can offer to patients. So now we are going to listen to Dr. Francisco. He's a psychiatrist with a degree from Unifest. He is the medical coordinator of Vila Maria. He will show us how care can be offered for persons who came from the justice system. I would like to thank all of you for being here, and I would also like the invitation to take part in this Congress. My name is Francisco. I am a psychiatrist and one of the medical coordinators of UME. It's Department of Psychiatric Diseases of the neighborhood Vila Maria. So the prosecution offices and sending patients to get treatment at UME. Since we are in an international congress, I think it's really important to talk about SUS, the public health system of Brazil. The Constitution in 1988 was very important. Healthcare is right of everyone and a duty of the government. And then in 1990, there were articles defining which are the objectives of the healthcare system. So we have to be, it has to identify and broadcast conditioning factors and determinant healthcare information, and it has to formulate healthcare policies that are focused on patients. So Brazil is a huge country. It has continental dimensions and is extremely populated. Although we face many difficulties, we are able to treat some really complex cases. SUS has some principles. It's universal, it is equal, it's regional, and it is divided into levels of complexity. Dr. Eduardo works in primary care. I work in second care, and SUS also has plays a very important social role. Alcohol and other drug use is a huge problem. At least 10% of population in urban centers use some sort of psychoactive substance in an abusive way. Here is some data about a national surveillance that was very good surveillance. It was the third surveillance done with this population, and the data is rather interesting. So, for example, in this surveillance, we saw that 30% of the Brazilian population had used alcohol at least 30 days before the interview. So 30% of the population had used alcohol in the past 30 days. It's a lot of people, and 16.5% did binge drinking. This figure is huge. If out of those who have had alcohol in the past year, 38.4% declared binge drinking. Binge drinking is closely related with what Dr. Eduardo said. It's related with violence, with death in car crashes, and we can see that these things are highly prevalent. Consumption over life is higher amongst men. At least 74.3% of men have had alcohol before, and women 59%. And the first consumption, it's a median of the age. Men started at 15.7 years old, and women 17.1 years old. So amongst teenagers, youths, they started drinking earlier. They are starting to have the first contact with alcohol earlier. And about 1.5% of the population was dependent on alcohol. I think this figure is higher. And 3.5% of those who had consumed in the previous year, 119,000 were teenagers, which is a huge number of teenagers who were dependent on alcohol. The study separated other substances. It had alcohol, tobacco, and other substances. Other substances are marijuana, hashish, skink, cracks, solvents, MDMA, ayahuasca, LSD, heroin, cocaine. So there's another part of the study that evaluates all these substances. So the use of marijuana in the past 30 days was 5 times higher than the other substances. And the use of substance over life showed that at least 15 million people had used one of those substances once in life. Of course, that there are different substances. The median of first consumption was 16.6 years old, and amongst teenagers, 13.1 years old. And so we can see that with marijuana, we have the same behavior as with alcohol. Teenagers start earlier. And this is very interesting data that the surveillance brought us, which is treatment over life. 1.6 million individuals have undergone some sort of treatment, narcotics or anonymous or any other type of care. 1.1% of the general population is dependent, and 1.4% reported use of tobacco, alcohol, or some other drug substance throughout their lives. So we can see that very few people who use some sort of substance seek help. There's bias and there's stigma, and sometimes it's too late when they seek care. This is other important piece of information because it's really closely related to therapeutic justice. So 7.5% of the individuals, which means 11.5 million, drove under the influence of alcohol in the past 12 months. So we can see that there are a lot of people who drive under the influence of drug, which can cause accidents. Most of those who drove were young, and 0.8% drove after using some other type of illicit substance in the past 12 months, because alcohol is much more accessible. And this has severe consequences for society. 4.4 million people discussed with someone about the effects of alcohol in the past 12 years. This is something that can lead to cases of violence or lawsuits, and therapeutic justice refer these cases to us. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about my branch. AMI is an outpatient area with specialized care, and where I work, we focus on psychiatric care. We are part of the secondary care within SUS. You cannot just walk in, okay? Patients need to be referred from somewhere else. And in our laboratory, we have 5 teams. A team that deals with relationship disturbances, others team for children, for elderly, for those who have problems with alcohol and drugs. We have different professionals. We have psychologists, occupational therapists, because it's impossible to work with mental health only with psychiatrists. It's necessary to have a multidisciplinary team. I started in 2010, and as I said, it's part of secondary care within SUS. Since 2012, we've established a partnership with the Public Ministry. We have a partnership with the Program of Therapeutic Justice of the area of Santana. And between March 2012 and 2021, 112 individuals, offenders, were referred to us. So the offenders visit us. They are firstly seen they see psychiatrists, psychologists, and nurses. They take part on support groups, and they stay in those support groups for about 3 months. And here there is more data about this partnership we have with the Public Ministry. Information about the patients we treated. So between March 2012 and May 2021, we rendered service for 112 patients. So 59.8% complied with the treatment, and 90% were men. And most of them had some disturbance related with alcohol abuse, and 17% with the use of cannabis, 10% cocaine or crack, 4% multiple substances. What is interesting is that we ended up being able to diagnose other mental disorders. This is a pizza chart that shows diagnosis based on CID-10. Some patients gave up treatment before seeing the doctor. They are first screened and then they see the doctor. So there is a number of people who didn't show up for the medical appointment, and it's 14%. But as you can see, most of them had some sort of disorder, which is something really worrying. So they have a diagnosis on mental disorder that has to be treated. So 53% of the patients met criteria that showed alcohol dependency. Out of those who had some disturbance rated with marijuana, 63% of them could be included in CID-10, and out of those who used cocaine, it was 73%. I made a quick presentation to give you an overall point of view of what IRMA does. IRMA offers services care for patients who have been referred not only from the justice system but from the other departments of the public healthcare system. IRMA offers a multi-sectorial treatment, and I think it is a very good opportunity for people, because they are going to receive treatment that is broader, and they're going to be able to be evaluated in a very thorough way. As I told you, we have a multidisciplinary team, and we address the problems from different points of view. So 98% of the people who saw the medical, who went to the medical appointment, had some disorder, mental disorder related, and some sort of mental disorder, and then at least half of them finished the treatment. And I think this is something very important for the Justice Department, because here we have funds involved, or so this is what I wanted to share with you about therapeutic justice in partnership with IRMA. This is the bibliography. I can share it with you if you want, and this is it. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Francisco, for your words. In reality, the data that Dr. Francisco shared with us about the partnership with therapeutic justice is something that emerged in 2012, and it was a result of Dr. Eduardo Laranjeira. He realized that it was necessary to connect the healthcare system with prosecutors, judges, and lawyers. And after doing this, we were able to develop therapeutic justice. It works with the strength of the very society. Many areas of Brazil, we could have the healthcare system as a partner of the judicial branch of the government. We could develop specific programs for specific patients. I didn't understand that we are not going to have time for Q&As. But I will ask the two panelists to stay outside for a little while so that you can ask a few questions if you want. I would like to thank Paulo and De Martelli and the organizers of Free Mind for the way they organized the conference. They put so much effort to put together an event that addresses such important topics. I would like to invite you and communicate you that tomorrow at 11, anonymous alcoholics are gonna present a panel. If you're still here, there will be this panel tomorrow. Is that it, Paulo? Yes. Important. Dr. Mário, I would like to thank you very much.